mates, my name is Kana. I'm a Bachelor of English Literature major at UINSA, or State Islamic University of Sunan Ampel, Surabaya. So on my first video, I want to tell you about myself, what I learned in university, and I will tell you all about my majors. So what is that? Let's check it out. In English Literature major, we not only studied about literature, but we also studied about linguistics. Actually, we studied linguistics a lot. It's a lot and more than literature topics. So we have more linguistics topics than literature topics, but the literature topics has the longer durations. So I will divide the linguistic topics, literature topics, and the others or additional topics. So the first linguistic topics, we have this one, Introduction to English Linguistics, of course, linguistics. And we have History of English Language. Of course, before we studied about a language, we have to know about the history. And we have vocabulary, phonology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, and research method in linguistics. Before we have research method, we have reading, like 3 stages of reading topics, and we have structure. We have 3 stages of structure also, and we have TOEFL structure, and we have speaking and writing, 3 stages of them. Yeah, that's a lot. And then we have a written translation and oral translation. Yeah. And then we also have a cultural discourse, critical discourse analysis, and cross-cultural understanding. So that's all linguistic topics. And then on the literature topics, we have Introduction to English Literature, we have History of English Literature, and we have Classic, Romantic, Modern Literature. So we learn literature based on the period or the era. And we have Theory of Literature, we have Literary Criticism, and we have Research Method on Literature. So only that, but the duration of the study was so long, almost 3 hours. And then there's other compulsory topics that we must obtain from this university, like Indonesian language, and Introduction to Islamic Studies, and Introduction to Hadith and Al-Quran, and philosophy. Yes, Introduction to Philosophy. And then we have Introduction to Social Science and Culture. We also have 4 groups of topics that you can choose based on your passion. You can choose whether it is human resource development, whether it is creative writing, or maybe you can choose teaching, or maybe you can choose a literature. So I choose mixed of them. So I will give you a hint about what the topic is, just one by one. Okay. So first, Introduction to English Linguistics. That's just only a summary of your major in a whole 8 semester. You only have it like overview. Yes, this is the overview of your study in the next semester. So you got this on your first semester, first year or first semester. So on a vocabulary, we learned about how we can produce a word, like it's similar like syntax, or maybe in vocabulary we learned about word formation and all the components. Word formation, I think. And then phonology, we learned about the sound, how we can pronounce English. We learned about the symbols, and we learned about the organ that we use to produce in English. It's so complicated in phonology. In syntax, we learned about sentence, how we can analyze and how we can produce a sentence with some pattern, but we can analyze the pattern more. And then we have semantics. It's study about sign and meaning. It's study about sentence and the meaning, but it's also connected to the other context. So when we connect the meaning and the context, and then we can call it as pragmatics. So we study pragmatics to connect between sign, meaning, and context. And then we have research method on linguistics. We have structure, stage 1, 2, 3, and then we have TOEFL structure, and we have reading, we have pronunciation, social linguistics. Now, this is my favorite major, social linguistics. How is language is the true reflection of a social interaction. So we study social linguistics, how we can switch from one language to the other language, how can we mix between one language to another language. So this is very interesting. And we have psycholinguistics, how we produce language in our mind, and how we acquire language, how we learn language, and we record in our mind. So we have speaking, stage 1, 2, 3. We have writing, also 3 stages, and we have written and oral translation. Written translation is all about translating in a written text. Oral translation, we translate orally, like in a international meeting, and you are the translator, so that's oral translation. And then we have critical discourse analysis. Yeah, we criticize a text based on the context, and we try to be more critical about it. For example, like maybe the text is related to the power or related to the mystical story or something like that. So we have to be more critical in reading a text by using critical discourse analysis. And then we have cross-cultural understanding. It's so interesting. It was such a fun class, like we studied about one culture, and we try to explain and we try to demonstrate our culture to others. Yeah, it's like some nations, and we gather in a class. So we make costumes, and we speak the languages, we introduce their culture, we mix it up with English. So it's like opened up our mind to the world. So that is about linguistics. Yes, a hint about linguistics topics. And then about literature topics, we learned literature based on the period. For example, like classical literature, modern literature, and romantic literature. It was so beautiful and unforgettable moment of studying literature. Like in classical literature, we studied about a classic literature that maybe has some characteristics of like old history, or maybe myth, or maybe something like deals with power or supernatural and something illogical. So I performed like Oedipus, the story of Oedipus, the man who married his own mother, and we can learn so many about the classic literature, because yeah, it's a classic, it's full of myth, and yeah, it's fun. After studying literature, we have to deal with the theory. Of course, we learned about the theory to make a literature analysis. After learning about the literature theory, so we use the theory to make a literary criticism. We criticize literature, we analyze the literature critically, of course, and we can explain by logical analysis. So that's how we analyze a literature. And then the last we study about research method on literature. Of course, after studying the method and we make our research proposals and we make our research and then we make it on seminar. So that's it about literature topics. So that's my story about my major. So if you want to know more about my major and my life, I don't know, not my life, about my experience in English literature major, please comment at the comment section below. Bye mates!
I put on for my